Got it going.
Got it going. All right, perfect. So let me start sharing my screen and we shall begin. All right, with any luck, you guys can see my slide there. So please feel free to unmute, chime in if you have any questions as we go through this. I want to make this as open and interactive as possible. If you have any questions, post in the chat. We will go through just a few slides to level set what Phantom is, why it's needed, and then we'll dive into more of a hands-on section. But please, at any time, chime in, and I'd love to dig deeper into any topic. I love playing around with Phantom, and it's a topic I'm passionate about. So, what is Phantom? Why is it needed? Oh, by the way, I should mention in case, I did present, what was it, a few weeks ago now, John, but I should mention that, where did this stupid present thing go? There we go. So my name is Kelby Shelton. I'm a consulting sales engineer with Splunk, and recently joined Splunk from a customer, if any of you don't know me, and I try to keep pretty active in the Kansas City user group. I live in Kansas City, been in Missouri all my life. So this next slide is a forward-looking statement, just saying that some of the stuff we talk about is as is the product today. Any future things I might mention or might let slip out, they can change at a moment's notice. So don't let those, don't take those as law. So our agenda, as I mentioned, is we're going to talk about a little bit about the product, why it's needed. We're going to do a installation and setup to just kind of show everyone how easy it is to get rolling with Phantom. We're going to work a investigation, kind of how I would approach things, point out some of the case management features of Phantom if you haven't explored those yet. And then we're going to ultimately turn the investigation we worked into automation, because that's really the goal, to move at machine speed. And then as time allows, we'll do some advanced playbook dev, show some things I've been working on, and if you guys have any questions about how to do more advanced playbook development, I'd be happy to share my insight. I'm always learning as well on how to do bigger and better things with Phantom. So these are some of the problems that Phantom was designed to solve. We have a shortage of security professionals, and even more so with the current crisis, we have people expected to do more with less. We have a myriad of point products, as we call them, that are all kind of static. They don't like to talk to each other. And we have an increasing number of alerts. And even if you have implemented risk-based alerting, which I talked about last time, you still have some alerts that you want to take action on. There's still things that need to be done every time, and those don't go away. And then ultimately, the speed of doing menial tasks is bogged down by humans, right? We're not so great at doing things quickly, reliably, and repeatably. So ultimately, that's where Phantom comes in. It's here to help us automate repetitive tasks, to link together all those products we have, and perform those actions at machine speed. And as a former analyst, as a former incident responder, what I want you to take away is that Phantom is not here to replace the analyst. Phantom is here to empower the analyst, to let them do more of the tasks they enjoy versus the tasks that are repetitive and that they don't enjoy. So this slide is to help you understand where Phantom fits in. Now, if you've never heard of this, I hadn't before I joined Splunk. The OODA loop originated as a military term, and it describes a process of winning an engagement. So we observe, we orient, we decide, and then we act. And ultimately, as applied to the cybersecurity context, on the left-hand side, we had our point products that I mentioned just a slide ago, IPS, endpoint, web application firewall, etc. In the middle, we have our analytics products. Then we move into the human tier, where most of our SOC lives. They ingest all this information, and they have to make a decision. And then we have to turn around and act on those point products. Initiate a block, quarantine a device, etc. So where does Splunk fit in? Well, we have two primary ways. Sorry, I shouldn't say two, but we have a myriad of products that fit in this OODA loop. On the left-hand side, we have Splunk Core, designed to pull in logs from all those point products so we can at least see what's going on. And then our analytics tier, which includes enterprise security, user behavior analytics, that's designed to make sense of all that data. And then Phantom. Phantom fits in by enabling and empowering that decision-making and acting tier so that the way I like to use it is I like to present the analyst with an enriched alert with all the information that they normally would have gone out and grabbed, present it up front and center so they can make an informed decision and then act. When they decide to act, it happens immediately. And you don't have to wait on a ticket to the firewall team to implement a change in 12 hours. And you know, that's not going to cut it in the world of cybersecurity. So the primary features of Phantom are automation, orchestration, collaboration, event management, case management, and reporting and metrics. Most of the time, you will have heard of Phantom in the context of automation and orchestration, but know that even if you have Splunk Enterprise Security, Phantom presents some advanced abilities here within these last four triangles. So Phantom has more prescriptive and more repeatable case management. You'll see that today in the demo. Phantom has some collaboration abilities built in. Obviously, something like Victor Ops or a platform like that is going to get you more collaboration abilities, but there are some that we'll show you today. And then reporting and metrics. Phantom takes care of some important things that are often asked for by leadership. When did you open that case? When did you receive that alert? When did you open it? How long did it take you to triage it? How long did it take you to respond? How long did it take you to close? All of those metrics are up front and center and constantly go for you, so you don't have to come after the fact and document those things. And then, of course, with our Splunk Enterprise integration, every part of the Phantom platform is exportable and loggable in Splunk. And that goes whether you have Splunk on-prem or Splunk Cloud. So you can get some advanced reporting and things out of with that bi-directional communication. So this is the current state of the Splunk Security Operations Suite. Of course, mission control is that kind of unified operation that sits on top of the application tier of Splunk products and allows you to have visibility from that single pane of glass. So if you are looking at Phantom or want more experience with Phantom, know that ultimately, if you have Splunk and you have Phantom, odds are you're going to be logged into both. And that single pane of glass is really mission control. So that's the thing that'll marry all of your Splunk products so you don't have to log in And really, you know, I've been working in the world of security operations for several years now, and mission control makes that single point of glass a reality, and it's really cool, especially with Phantom as the engine to connect everything together. And then finally, my.phantom.us. I highly encourage everyone sign up for an account if you haven't done so already. That's where you're going to find the latest information about apps. That's where you're going to find the Phantom Community Edition. Now, what is the Phantom Community Edition? That is the full product. The only difference between that and the a purchased version of Phantom from Splunk is a license key. So that makes going from testing out things to production lightning fast, because that is the product. So sign up for my.phantom.us. All right, so with that brief little overview out of the way, we can dive into actually how to get Phantom up and running. Does anyone have any questions so far? Feel free to unmute yourself, or John, if you've seen anything in the chat, let me know.
Hi, can you ping me that site URL?
Sure. Let me post it in the chat for you.
Is this for only US clients? What about the rest of the people?
I think that is the global URL. So even though it is a
Okay.
.us domain, I noticed Jay Sundberg is another sales engineer on the call today. If you have any other insight into that, let me know, Jay. But I think that is the worldwide way to access it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the question, though. Appreciate it. So that didn't expand so well. The window is just getting tinier. All right, hopefully you guys can see that. Let me try to scale that for you. Okay, that's much better. All right, so this is a fresh install of the Phantom OVA. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
All right, so this is what you're going to be confronted with. I don't know why I say confronted. Presented with, how about that? Confronted sounds so aggressive. This is what you'll be presented with when you launch that OVA. This is your first configuration. So this will set up the root and user account. So let's just give it, something like password. Obviously, don't do that in production, right? But for the demonstration purposes, you're done. Phantom's up and running. So it's going to be available at the address it picks up. You can explore some of the settings in here. You know, maybe if you have DHCP, I just hit configure network, and then of course that tries to pick up any DHCP settings that are available. And then if you have a static DHCP, you can do it there. Item number 3, system shell, will let you get shell access for any root level changes. So let's access our web UI.
Uh, one more doubt. Is it Phantom is like just another app like SIEM in Splunk, or it's a altogether new software product?
Phantom is a standalone software. So it is not an app that lives on top of Splunk. Now Phantom does
Okay.
ship with a version of Splunk, but it lives on its own operating system here. This is just the CentOS. There are ways to deploy Phantom with a RPM or a Amazon market image as well in AWS. So, but yeah, it is its standalone thing, and you'll see that the UI is a little bit different than Splunk as well. So in order for me to get to my VM here, I'll just add in a quick port forward rule. Phantom by default runs on 443. Oops, what happened to my window there? There it is, okay. All right, first login, by default, the password is password. And of course you should change that for to match your password requirements. And we'll walk through that as well. So the first thing Phantom has you do is run through a quick tour. It generates an event, shows you that event, asks you if you want to run a playbook, runs a playbook, and then allows you to see what the playbook is doing. The reason I rushed through that is we're gonna do some of those things today. But ultimately what you're left with is a basic configuration. So I encourage you to run through this. This gets the majority of the administration settings out of the way that you'll want to do first. All right, so we'll set a new password. Give a company name, set a time zone. Put an email and then a base URL. This would be a DNS name, usually domain name, but for our purposes, we'll just do localhost. And then you can set up a SMTP asset. Why would you do that? Well, as mentioned here, Phantom does a lot around email. So if you want Phantom to send emails about SLA breaches or notifications when you receive new tasks, or if a action approval is waiting for you, you'll want to set a SMTP server that Phantom can connect to and then send email out from. For our purposes, we're not going to set up one. And then we choose our data source. So Phantom gets data in from a variety of sources. These are just some of the ones that it suggests out of the box. Of course, Splunk and Splunk Enterprise Security, for those on the call, obviously Splunk user group, this would be the primary way to get data in. And that is a bidirectional functionality. So you can get data in from Splunk and you can push data over to Splunk as well. For our presentation today, we'll just do some sample data and we'll configure an asset, give it a label, and we'll dive into some of these terms here in a minute. Hit continue, and then suggest a playbook that you want to run on your generator assets, and some assets if you want to configure them. Out of the box, Phantom comes with a few for like geolocation and MaxMind as well. We're going to configure a virus total app here in a moment. And of course, it recommends some apps based on this playbook that we suggested. But we're not going to use that playbook much, so we don't really have to configure those. And done. So that's it. Phantom is installed. It's up and running. We're good to go. We're ready to automate. That took, I don't know, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes for me to explain everything. So it's really as easy as that. Now, most of your work is going to come into configuring apps and assets, and we will walk through how that is done, and that is an easy process as well. Before I move on to the next part of the presentation, any questions? Anything in the chat so far, John?
Nope.
So we can integrate the Splunk, IBM Curator, all this through the URLs and the admin username and passwords. That's it. No additional system changes is required, right?
There is a list of ports and protocols that Phantom uses by default on Splunk docs.
Okay.
If you have strict firewall requirements. Other than that, no, there's no additional configuration. If we have an integration for that product, and most of the large SIMs we do, you can ingest those alerts straight into Phantom. Like you said, just a simple username or password or an API key or something along those lines. We'll see in a second how that works.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's walk through a couple elements of the home screen. So at the top, we have our ROI, or return on investment widget. Phantom has the ability to configure the average analyst salary, as well as the average shift schedule to show, think shift leads or SOC directors or anything like that, to show the money and the value that Phantom is returning the more you automate and the more actions you run. From your home screen as well, you can see the status of various events, the playbooks and actions that have been run against them, as well as asset health. This is really handy. Phantom does a periodic asset check to see if your assets are connected and healthy. As you add more apps, they will show up here, and if there's any issues, there'll be a error or some sort of failure flag here that'll let you know that that app is unhealthy, and you can click into it and see the issue. All of these widgets on the homepage are configurable. That can be done from the configure tab up here. You can turn things on and off. You can toggle all widgets on or off. You can see the page just went blank there. And then you can also think, again, shift lead or manager. You can see the results or the various activities going on in your security operations center. So you can view the activities for various users. There's only one user obviously set up. And then labels. So as alerts come in, they're given different labels, and you can see the activity from those different labels. For example, maybe I want to see if I have any outstanding Splunk notables, or I have any outstanding phishing email events that need to be worked. And you can do that here. You can also change your time frame. And then within each widget, you can rearrange them and collapse them or make them bigger. Okay, so that's the home screen. So we want to set up our first app so we have something to do within the Phantom platform. And this feeds into the orchestration element of connecting things together, connecting our tool set. So the primary way most of you will be integrating apps is fittingly through the apps screen. So you go from home to apps. And from here, you can see the apps that we have configured, only 6, as well as any unconfigured apps. So right now, the Phantom platform ships with 196 apps. We have much more than that available on my.phantom.us, as well as when you click New Apps, you'll see a listing of all those new apps. We have 112 more that you could download, and they're always being updated. And speaking of app updates, that's a very easy process again. Click App Updates, and it presents the updates that are available for you to download. And this is very zippy, very quick. You just hit Update All, and they'll just update real quick. And Phantom has version control. So if you've downloaded multiple versions of an app, you can swap between them very easily just by selecting the version you want to use. So we're going to configure one application, VirusTotal. Here it is listed as an unconfigured app. Obviously, we don't have any configured. And we have our documentation for that app, as well as all the abilities or actions that that app can perform. Now, if a application has additional abilities that is supported, you can open up a support ticket to have the functionality changed and improved. You can request the source code. If you are comfortable with Python, you can quickly modify the application code to add in that extra functionality that you would like it to have. It's something I've done many times for several apps. So it's a pretty easy process. And of course, you can engage professional services as well for advanced app development. And there's the community. Yes.
Are all the apps owned, are they like the Splunk apps, TAs that are owned by different people that create them, or are these all Splunk published?
They are provided by community, Splunk, and our partners and vendors. So they are in a way similar to Splunk-based apps in that they're provided by a lot of different members of the community. Now they are, there's a more stringent, obviously, since we're talking about connecting up components of your tool set, and we're talking about running Python code. Phantom is built on Python. There are more stringent vetting processes for Phantom than you would experience in something like Splunk base. Imagine the kind of vetting processes for getting a app cloud certified. That's kind of what we're talking about in more stringent, because it has to, it can't break the platform, and it can't introduce any sort of malicious code or anything like that. So there's a more stringent process, but apps are provided by anyone can submit an app. I think we have, I'm trying to think of some third parties.
I'm guessing with that vetting process, you see a lot less issues such as the Windows TA issue that broke the whole process there.
Well, what's nice is you're integrating a API, and most of the time, that's going to be as easy as reading the vendor's documentation on their API. So of course, some vendors are better documented than others. ServiceNow, for instance, fantastically documented API, and it has an explorer you can use to play around with their API, but some vendors may not have as robust of a documentation. So there are, it really just depends on the vendor. But yeah, these are much more robust to failure than than Splunk base, whereas that worked in a specific version and worked in that customer's environment, and I tried to download it and it doesn't work. I've never experienced that with Phantom apps.
Thank you.
All right, so back to our virus total. We kind of got off on an app tangent. Oh, I was going to mention, yes, Phantom Cyber / Phantom apps out on GitHub is where our publicly available apps are. More and more of our source code is being published out there. So right now, if there's an app not out there, it's just a support ticket. Say, hey, I would like this app, the source code, and support is very quick to get that to you. And then you have all the source code. Otherwise, you can check out on there. People are submitting to there all the time as well. I'm working on an app for CR Excavator right now. So that's a community element as well. Different Splunkers are working on different apps and things like that. So underneath this app umbrella, we can configure assets. So we click configure new asset, and we can have one to many assets underneath an app umbrella. Why do we do that? Well, think of your services like AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, where you have multiple tenants, you have multiple teams and resources and subscriptions and permissions. We want our assets to reflect the permissions it has without or sharing access to the application actions. So we can create multiple assets based on our different tenants and all have it underneath this organized umbrella. For virus total, not nearly as complex. We can just create one asset called virus total, give it a description if we like, and then it just requires an API key. Super simple. You can sign up for a free virus total account to get one. If you have a paid account, you can use that here as well. So I'll plug in my API key. It is stored encrypted in Phantom's vault. And if you are using a public version, like I'm doing here, I highly encourage you check out this checkbox here, which limits the number of requests. So if you have a playbook with 20 URLs and you're all trying to or 20 files, you're all trying to detonate those and get reputation all at once, you want to make sure that's enabled so you don't get a bunch of errors from virus total saying you've exceeded your limit if you have a free account. And that's it. App's ready to go. I hit test connectivity and I passed. So most integrations are exactly like that. Just throw in an API key. Maybe they give you a URL if you have a dedicated instance like ServiceNow, and you hit save and you're done. A couple of features I wanted to point out here under advanced. If you have a, I can't think of it, password management solution like Secret Server or HashiCorp or CyberArk, you can configure Phantom to use the credentials out of those. And here you would just say, well, actually it's not exposed here. So there would be another tab here that would give you options to use the API key or username password from those solutions instead of having them stored in Phantom's vault. So just an option there. The other type of app that Phantom has is ingest apps. So any connection to a SIM or email or anything where it will be feeding Phantom information, those are called ingest apps. And if it is an ingest app, you will see a tab here called ingest settings. Under ingest settings, you configure what labels you want to apply. For instance, we'll apply the label generator. You can set a polling interval or run it on a scheduled timer. For our purposes, we're just going to do a single poll, and we're going to generate 50 events. All right. It randomly generated a amount of artifacts from 1 to 10 per container. Now, this might be a good opportunity to talk about these terms. So Phantom containers, what is that? That is Phantom speak for an event. That can be an alert from your SIM, that can be an email from your phishing inbox, really anything with some amount of data in it for Phantom to act upon. And what is that data called within an event? Well, it's called an artifact. And you'll see those in a moment. So artifacts, you can have as many artifacts as you want within an event, and those are pieces of information related to that event. So now we'll pivot over to our sources and we'll work an investigation. Any questions about, we're kind of moving out of administration and more into case management, but before we do that, just wanted to see if anyone had questions for me. Okay, so this is the primary investigation triage screen. This is configurable, and you can move around these columns. You can create new labels, new columns. You can remove what you want to show. There's so many options, and we don't really have time to get into all of them today. A couple of features I wanted to point out is the ability to create your own filters. So as an analyst, that's hugely valuable. For instance, say I would like any event with a label of generator. Notice it's automatically added the filter right here with a status of new or a status of open, and with the word malicious. From there, all I have to do is click save, give it a name. So unresolved malicious events. Notice that I have my filter up here saved. And then of course, when I go into sources, I now have a new filter as well. I can select directly. So we'll go ahead and clear that. The other feature from here, you can do bulk event management. So I can select multiple events. I can delete them. I can edit them. I can add them to a case. I can change their status, their owner, all of that on every event straight from this screen. So let's dive in to an event. Let me go ahead and import event. I wanted to make sure. So with generator, you may or may not get something that is, it's random, right? It pulls from a file, it randomly generates events, and you may or may not have something with a file hash or name or anything like that. I wanted to make sure for this presentation, we of course have an event with a file hash because I want to show you the VirusTotal integration. And we're going to design a playbook as well based on a file hash, because that's something that is fairly common to security. So we have our event here, trojan.js.downloader. We click into it and we see our main investigation screen. By default, you will be given the summary view. And the summary view includes the timeline, workbook, evidence, notes, reports. That is configurable. You can rearrange things. You can uncheck them. For example, if I don't want to see workbook or reports. There's also the double chevron, which exposes more information here on the top right. So we have our event info. We can change our status, who the owner is. Whoops, excuse me. And we can add tags. For instance, add a tag called Trojan, malware, notable, whatever you want it to say. There's also the HUD, which we'll show off in a minute, where you can pin interesting information. I guess I'll show off something like time to resolve. We'll give it a nice friendly blue color. So there's our HUD, time to resolve. That's just one way you can use the Phantom HUD, and we'll show off a few other ways. So a little explanation about our tabs here. We have our timeline view. This is interactable. You can move across the timeline. You can turn elements on and off. And you can also create comments straight from the timeline. And you can view results of actions and view information straight from the timeline. Workbooks are modular. How do I describe them? They are modular templates that you can apply to an event that matches whatever workflow you have in your environment. So they can be as complex as NIST 861, which spans multiple phases from detection to containment to remediation, or they can be a single phase and a single task. And you can add multiple from a case. So maybe think of an investigation that starts off as a malware investigation, and it pivots into a phishing investigation, which pivots into command and control. So you can load up different templates as the investigation changes. So for now, we'll just load in the NIST 861, which, as you can see, has multiple phases across the top, and each has their own tasks to work. Evidence is where you can mark important items as the analyst goes. So someone coming along later, maybe in the summary view, wants to see the quick hits. They can immediately see the notes that are important, artifacts that are important, etc. Of course, you can leave notes within the platform, and you can generate reports, PDF reports about everything that's been done up until this point, comments that have been left, etc. So as an analyst, our primary view is going to be the analyst view, which exposes a couple other things. One being the activity history. This is an immutable or unchangeable activity log of everything that's been done on this investigation up until this point. So it's perfect for record keeping and knowing the things that have been done. If comments have been left, hey John, need you to work on this thing. See a comment that was left, or you can call people out and say, hey, asset owner, I need you to run this action. And that will send them a notification. We also have our mission guidance, where you can call in mission experts. Think of this as like a Netflix for case management. It recommends things based on your past history. And the primary way to store information is artifacts, which are little, as I mentioned, little snippets of information. And of course, files, you can drag and drop any sort of file into Phantom's Vault to have that securely stored and used down the line for automation. So for this investigation, we've got a Trojan downloader, we have a file artifact. What is it? Well, we have a hash, a file name, and a URL. You can have as many artifacts as you want. Maybe you have an artifact for a host that includes the host name, device ID, etc. Maybe an IP artifact, whatever you'd like. You'll notice that these are hyperlinked. Now, a little piece of information here. By default, Phantom is configured to not hyperlink externally URLs. You can turn that on, but I don't encourage it, especially if you're using it for security. Now, if you're using it for IT automation, that might be useful. But if you're using it for security, leave this off so that you don't accidentally go to a malicious URL. But this is off currently, which means when I click on it or any of these items, I will be given a context menu, which includes the brief overview of this IOC, the ability to tag it or pin it to a HUD. For instance, I would say, let's pick this hash here. I would say suspicious hash. Give it a color of red. And there it is pinned to the HUD. You can also see any related events, which makes cross-correlation super easy. Have I ever seen this hash before? What cases, what events contain this hash? And then ultimately, we can do something with this hash. Is it malicious? I want to know. I don't want to go to VirusTotal. I want to document the investigation right here in my case management solution. So I click on File Reputation. It automatically selects the VirusTotal asset. If we had multiple, for instance, a sandbox solution or another source of intel, we can run this action multiple times across those multiple assets all at once. We only have VirusTotal configured, so we'll go ahead and launch that. And that presents the information in a few different ways. First of all, we have our widget section. This is configurable as well. You can toggle them on and off. And the widgets are designed to give you a quick hit of the information returned by the integration. So we have the detection ratio, we have the number of detections, the number of scanners that saw this hash. These are, you can move these around. You can make them bigger, like a full screen view. You can also toggle the JSON, which is very useful for seeing the complete detailed. Maybe you want to see the results of what Microsoft said about the file. You can do that right from here. So that's one way to view the information. The second primary way is in the activity log, you have this clickable link. You've got a summary, but if you click that link, you'll be presented with a full screen file reputation, which contains both the JSON view that is interactable. I can expand everything if I want, as well as that table right from this screen. And of course, if you'd like to remove that and get back to your case, you can do that as well. From here, I can leave a note. For instance, I would say VirusTotal results, malicious file hash detected, moving on to block. So say I have this hash, I can run a new action, select from all the available actions that I have in my platform. For instance, if I had an endpoint product, I could quarantine that file, and so on and so forth, all from this screen. But ultimately, say I did quarantine this device. So I'll add a new card here. We'll say file quarantined, finished investigation, and move this to closed. So we worked an investigation. It's easy as that. Obviously, there's a lot more features that we didn't go over with this, but that's just kind of a brief overview of how you work an investigation inside a Phantom. You can merge multiple events into a case if you had multiple of these come in, or you can move those automatically through automation, etc. We're about to move into the automation piece, but any questions so far?
Can we have this recording?
Yeah, I think we are recording, John, and we'll share that out.
Yeah, we got a YouTube site that we'll be posting it up on, and I'll be sending it out to the user group. So
Sure,
it'll
great.
be posted with it.
Okay, so why purchase an automation orchestration platform? Because you're going to automate and orchestrate something, right? So this is all fine and dandy for manual stuff, but we want to automate this. So I don't have to leave notes. I don't have to go out to VirusTotal. I can have that served up, ready and waiting for me. So let's move on to playbooks. And we'll design a quick playbook. Show you how easy that is. So home, or our main navigator here, we have our playbooks. And we can go ahead and create a new playbook. We'll call this malware investigation. And we'll just get started. So we'll say action, VirusTotal, file reputation, grab a hash, and notice the platform has automatically filtered on the recommended parameters for what a file reputation for VirusTotal would require. So it shows you all the artifacts that are related to a hash, SHA-256, etc. So we'll just select a generic hash, hit go. And maybe we want to do something after this hash. Maybe we want to say if file hash, actually, sorry, one second. Okay, so I should probably explain this. We have our different action blocks. We'll go over this a little bit later in advanced playbooking, but we have our decision block here, which allows you to do if-else statements. And when we select our parameter, notice that we are downstream now from this file reputation. So Phantom will automatically suggest the file reputation block, since that is the preceding one. And we can say something that we want to queue off of. For example, positives, number of positives. So we have 2 data points for positives. We can use either one. We'll go ahead and use the summary, and we'll say if positives is greater than 15, throw out a number. Then we want to do a series of actions. What are those actions? Well, first we can call the Phantom API, and we'll pin it a message that says malicious file found. Oh, I didn't connect these up. That would help. There we go. All right, so now it's downstream. So malicious file found, and we'll say, we'll give it the hash that we used. Put a card, give it a nice bold red color. What else do we want to do? Well, maybe we want to initiate a quarantine. Well, we don't have a quarantine action, but we'll say this is a quarantine action. give it some bogus information. We'll call this quarantine file. So maybe we want to quarantine a file. And then we'll say, if quarantine successful, then close out the investigation. But for now, let's just leave it as is. Very simple playbook. If malicious, pin this to the investigation. We'll say it can operate on every label. Hit save. And we'll switch over to our other investigation, that Trojan downloader. Let's go ahead and get rid of these. Now, instead, we'll run a playbook. There's our malware investigation. And hit run. So way faster than I did it. The file reputation has already run and it's pinned the information to the investigation. And maybe this is run in active mode right here, which is maybe I toggle that on to active mode, which means every time Phantom sees generator, for instance, this label, or maybe that's notable, it runs every time and does this malware investigation every time. And now you have this information waiting for you. That can be notes, that can be pins, as I've done, that can be complex actions. You can call child playbooks. There's so many options with this that you could do for your investigation. Sky's the limit. And more people are using Phantom for not just security, but all orchestration, automation, and response. If you navigate to my.phantom.us, click on apps. You'll see one of the most recent apps is Splunk ITSI, which supports a myriad of actions for integrating with ITSI, as well as you'll see things related to AWS, for Azure, Compute, for VMware. So this is not just a security platform anymore. This is all orchestration, automation, and response. So that kind of wraps up what I wanted to show for setting up Phantom, for working a investigation, and then automating a small component of our investigation. And we're at about an hour. So I wanted to pause there. We set this for a couple hours because John mentioned about advanced playbook development. And I wanted to show off a little bit extra that you could do with the platform as time allowed. So John, what do you think about time-wise? How did you want to proceed?
I think with us virtual, I think it works out. I think we can, anybody that has to leave obviously can drop off, but I think it wants us to grab forward more of the advanced information. I think it's good.
Okay, perfect. So,
Kelby,
yes.
are there controls in place to prevent duplicate or like unnecessary actions? Say if I have an analyst working an email alert and one working a malware, and they both resolve to getting the same malicious file. But both of those analysts run the action to get the file reputation, right? To prevent costs against the licensing. Is there something that says like, hey, this has already been checked?
So I'm trying to think of a couple situations where, so most of the time you will see what has already been done in an investigation. So are you referring to an instance where you had 2 alerts come in and they happen to be related?
Right.
Okay. So one thing you could do is have automation merge those events together. Another thing you could do is, instead of running an action directly, as you saw that I did, where I clicked action and ran it directly, one thing I did a lot as a former Phantom customer that Carter and Aaron, they're on the call, they can attest to as well, is I set up these scripted actions. So we had a MSSP as well. So I basically said, okay, no one can do regular actions. No one can click action. That's not allowed, except for on-prem staff. Instead, what we're going to give is scripted actions to our MSSP and our tier 1 analyst or tier 2 analyst. And those scripted actions might contain a step here at the beginning where it says, it does a check. Maybe you have maybe you check the indicators of the Phantom platform and say, have I seen this before? Have I seen this IOC? Maybe you check a local list. So Phantom has the ability to support custom lists. Think of like a KV store, Splunk or CSV. So maybe you check a list and say, hey, have I seen this before? What's the reputation? If I have, post that to the investigation and make your decisions off that rather than calling the API. So that's another way to kind of control when you call the API.
Okay.
Yeah, so Phantom apps are going to do what you tell them to do. So if you tell them to do a reputation check on a hash, they're going to do that. So you'll want to build in those checks for yourself, and we supply all the tools and ability to do that within the platform, make that process easy. So I've got and by the way, if anyone else has any like interesting cases like that or things they're wanting to do with the platform, I love exploring these kind of ideas, and I'd be happy to answer those. But I did want to show you a playbook I whipped up just before our call for kind of related to this investigation, kind of taking it to the next level. So let me pivot over to that. So I've got our playbooks here, and let me fire up investigation. So I've got a suspicious file, investigation, and response. You'll notice this one is quite a bit longer. And I'll kind of break this down for you, what's going on here. So we'll just follow this top chain here. I'll click edit, and so you can see the components. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, this should be none. Don't know how that happened. All right, here we go. If file hash is not equal to null, then move on. Else, well, there's no else. So basically do nothing. Because I want to check if there's a file hash available. And this is a way to keep playbooks modular, to design a playbook for a specific use case, like maybe a notable event with a specific title. But this playbook can be used anywhere there's a file hash present. It doesn't have to be restricted to that one use case. So this is a way to keep playbooks to reuse the effort that you've already done. So I'm saying if not null, meaning there's a file hash present, then grab those not null file hashes. And this is a way I like to do, this is kind of pivoting into advanced development here. This is a way that we combine a decision block and a filter block so that you always ensure the downstream actions don't try to operate on null values. There's a few product reasons, I won't go into why we allow you to operate on null values. But ultimately, this is a way so that this playbook can be used anywhere and it always operates on values that are present. So from there, I grab that filtered, instead of artifacts directly, I grab the filtered artifacts. So this ensures that I have that file hash available. And then from there, I format a note. Now notes take HTML formatting markup, and I just grab a list of the top 5 that I like and see what those have to say. And then I add that note to the platform. And then from there, I make a decision. I say, this is the same thing I did just a few minutes ago. If greater than 15, then move on. Otherwise, stop right there. You've got an investigation with a note, and you've run the file reputation, and so that's already an improvement. So just stop right there. We don't need to act further. An analyst can come along and do some additional analysis. But otherwise, if multiple products are in agreement that this is malicious, then let's move on and pin that to the HUD. We'll say malicious file found, and there's the hash. Same thing we did in our previous example. We also want to go ahead and initiate a quarantine on that file using Defender ATP. And then if that quarantine is successful, we will pin it to the HUD with a status to let anyone else who comes along see real quickly, hey, found the hash, we quarantined it, life is good. So that is this stream at the top. In parallel, and you can have as many parallel work streams as you want, in parallel, we're also detonating a URL if it's present. So that's using URL scan, which is also another free service. So that's sitting there waiting for the analyst with more information. And we could do some sort of decision check here. You know, if the URL is malicious as well, do some additional action. And then at our top work stream here, you'll notice that it diverts here. And the reason it diverts is it prompts the analyst and says, hey, I found a malicious file detected. Do you want to quarantine that device? Here's the info. Here's the file. Here's the host name. Here's the username. Do you want to make a decision? And this is called a prompt block, and it supports many different types of responses. You can have multiple responses, and those responses can be a list, they can be a range, they can say, pick a number, 1 to 100, whatever you want it to be. For this, it's just a simple yes, no. Hey, do you want to quarantine this device because I found a malicious file? So if they say yes, then go ahead and initiate a quarantine and also pin that information to the HUD. Now, what I'm not doing here is coming off this and saying, if we've quarantined the file and we've quarantined the device and everything is successful, then close out the investigation, done. That would be true start to finish automation. And right now we're sticking an analyst in the middle of that, but maybe we trust another intelligence source. So maybe we say, if VirusTotal says it's bad and our sandbox says it's bad, then we're gonna, and it's on this segment of the network, or maybe it's this type of device, then yeah, go ahead, initiate a quarantine. We don't need to stick an analyst there. And it just, start to finish, does it. Completely works the investigation and then closes it out. So let's see this in action. Go ahead and save it.
Hey, Kelby, question for you.
Sure.
So after VirusTotal does this analysis and takes its next step and sends the information to the analyst, can you include information that VirusTotal returned in that message to the analyst?
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing here, and I apologize if I didn't show that clearly. So what I'm doing here is I've got a report based on the VirusTotal results. So I've got the number of positives, and this is downstream from the file reputation. So all the JSON and variables and things that were returned by VirusTotal are now available for automation in any which way we would like to use them. So I'm using them by presenting a report for the analyst. So I'm grabbing the Cylance results, if that's available, grabbing the McAfee result, Sentinel-1, etc. And I'm putting them in a list.
Okay, so that can be sent whenever you send a message asking if you want to quarantine the device. You could include like 15 or 20 different virus scans kind of.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, say I had multiple files, I could iterate through those and produce a format, a block that iterated through each run of that file reputation. So it's a huge long report with 10 different results for each file. That could be an option. I could send an email. I could take a format block here and I could say, hey, I want to run SMTP, which has not been configured yet, but say I want to send an email to someone about that report. Slack integrations, Teams integrations, you can post a message on a Slack channel and say, hey, here's a report. Do you want to do something about it? The Slack bot will listen for a result and we'll do a decision based on that. So lots of options. Okay, so the primary ways to test this playbook are, one, of course, jumping into an event. And maybe selecting this event and hit run playbook, or maybe jumping into this event and hitting run playbook. That would be the primary way for a human to interact with this playbook. Phantom comes with a suite of debugging tools as well. So we have the Python editor, which exposes the full code of this playbook. We also have the playbook debugger. So I can choose that event that I had just pulled up right here, event 196. And I can say, hey, run this playbook on event 196 and hit test. And that'll give me a full readout. And if there are any issues with this playbook, I would be able to see them. So here goes nothing. Keep in mind, this is a kind of test instance. I just stood up. Not everything's been configured and tested. So connectivity may or may not work. We'll see what happens here. One thing you'll note, I did modify this artifact and I included a couple things, a host name and a device ID. Why? Well, because maybe you're getting an alert from Splunk and you're using Defender ATP as your endpoint product. And Defender ATP requires this ID. And in that alert from Splunk, that ID comes in. And so you can use it for automation to quarantine a file and quarantine a device. So that would be an example of additional data that comes from your sources. All I did is I clicked Edit Artifact, and you can add anything you want. So container 196, hit test, and there it goes. Quarantine file failed. That's fine. The malicious file was found. We pinned it to the HUD. We have our virus total results. If we click our notes, we have a nice friendly note for the analyst that says what different things say this is. Fun idea. Maybe there's a source that you trust more than most. And you could say, if that source detected it, go Google what that signature is and present that to the analyst. Just an idea. So you'll notice that failed, but we did get our prompt that says, do you want to quarantine a device? We have the file info. We have a host name, no user. We'll say yes. We'll initiate a quarantine. We'll see if that works. Again, this is a test instance. And what's nice is it'll tell you, it does a pretty good job telling you why things fail, right here. So it says, I'm missing some parameters. It says one of these parameters are required and I got an empty list. So that tells me I need to go back and double check that something was left empty that was required. But on the bright side, we have our quarantine initiated, succeeded, isolated, and there's the pinned quarantine host. I do want to quarantine that file though. So I'm going to go ahead and hit, I'm going to try to run this again. So let's grab that hash and that device ID. We'll say run action, quarantine file. We'll give it that file hash. We'll give it that device ID, which I copied over from a notepad. And we'll give a phantom quarantine. Hit go. Oh. So Defender ATP requires a SHA-1, but guess what? We have a SHA-1 because we ran it in VirusTotal. So if I hit SHA-1, there's our SHA-1. Go ahead and click this 3-dot menu, which allows you to repeat that action so I don't have to fill all that out again. And I just swap out that hash for that hash, hit go. And there we go. It failed because device ID not found. But that's why you don't do live demos, right? Anyway. Oh, okay. That's why. So this SHA does not exist on this machine, which is right because I fictionalized this scenario. So this device ID exists, but that SHA is not on that machine. So that makes sense why that failed. Any questions?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay, very nice. So we can also take this information and do a little debug. Say, okay, hey, why did that fail? So we can go to our playbook, say quarantine file. Why are you failing? File hash. Device external ID. Not quite sure. I'll figure that out in a second. Anyway, so that's playbook development in a nutshell. That's how you take a simple idea and iterate on it. I took our playbook that we saw at the beginning, 3 simple steps, and I turned it into this. A lot more steps, and this could be expanded on more. I could automatically close the investigation. I could do some additional things. I could kick off a workflow off here. I could kick off a child playbook, whatever I want to do. All right. Appreciate everyone's time today.
Hey, got any questions for Kelby here before we wrap up? All right. Kelby, I really appreciate you presenting for us. It's a great topic. Job well done. appreciate everybody else showing up and coming out for this. If you've signed up, I noticed we have quite a few that aren't actually in the Kansas user group that signed up or didn't sign up for the meeting that made it to the meeting. I appreciate you guys, everybody, for stopping by. If you want to sign up, if you like some of the topics we've been following, you're welcome to sign up for the Kansas City user group, even if you're not in the Kansas City area. Always looking for people to help drive discussions and topics. So if you all have anything you want to run by us, or you guys want anything specific to present on, please let us know. I'd be happy to find somebody to present on it. So thank you everybody for coming out, and I'll get the recording posted to the YouTube channel, and it will go out with the follow-up email from the user group. So appreciate everybody and all your time. Thank you, Kelby.
Absolutely.
Everybody have a good day.